Life reaches a moment where forcing change no longer works. You push yourself to improve, to fix what feels broken, yet the harder you try, the heavier your heart becomes. Buddhism teaches that this heaviness is not a weakness, it is a message, a quiet signal that your soul is tired of carrying what no longer belongs to it. When you stop fighting yourself, something within you begins to soften, and in that softness, clarity is born. Reinvention does not begin with effort or struggle, it begins with letting go. In this video, you will discover 5 Buddhist self-care habits that gently release mental weight, loosen emotional knots, and guide you back to your true self, quiet, grounded, and free. 1. Let go of attachment to who you think you should be. In Buddhism, suffering begins with attachment, and one of the deepest and most exhausting attachments is the image you hold of who you think you should be. This image is often created slowly over time, shaped by family expectations, social pressure, comparison with others, past mistakes, and even motivational messages that constantly tell you to be more. You start believing that you are not enough as you are right now. You tell yourself that peace will come only when you are more successful, more disciplined, more admired, more confident, or more spiritually advanced. Without realizing it, this imagined version of yourself becomes a standard you are constantly trying to live up to, and that standard quietly turns into a prison. Every day, you measure your worth against expectations that were never truly yours. You judge your present self through the lens of an ideal future self. When you fall short, you feel disappointed, frustrated, or ashamed. Even on good days, you feel pressure to maintain an image. Buddhism teaches that this constant self-comparison is a major source of inner suffering because it keeps you trapped in resistance to the present moment. You are always trying to escape who you are instead of understanding who you are. This creates tension in the mind and heaviness in the heart. Buddhist self-care begins with releasing this inner pressure. Letting go of attachment to the ideal self means allowing yourself to be human again. It means recognizing that growth does not come from self-rejection, but from self-awareness and compassion. When you stop chasing an identity and stop trying to prove something to the world, your nervous system relaxes, your mind becomes quieter. You begin to experience peace not as a reward for becoming someone else, but as something available to you right now. Letting go of the ideal self does not mean you stop improving or stop caring about your life. It does not make you lazy, weak, or unmotivated. Instead, it makes you honest. You stop pretending. You stop forcing yourself into roles that drain you. You start living from presence instead of performance. You do things because they feel meaningful, not because they help you maintain an image. You allow yourself to move at your own pace, instead of rushing to match someone else's timeline. This habit also teaches you to respect your current season of life. Buddhism reminds us that everything has its time, growth, rest, confusion, clarity. When you accept where you are without self-judgment, you create the right conditions for natural change. Reinvention does not happen through self-violence or constant self-criticism. It happens through understanding, patience, and letting go. True reinvention begins the moment you stop fighting who you are right now. When you release the need to become someone else, you finally make space to become more fully yourself. 2. Release emotional clutter through mindful awareness. In Buddhism, the mind is often compared to a clear sky, while emotions and thoughts are like passing clouds. The problem begins when you believe the clouds are the sky. Emotional clutter forms when you carry unprocessed feelings from the past, anger that was never expressed, sadness that was never understood, fear that was never acknowledged. Over time, these emotions pile up quietly inside you. You may continue living, working, and smiling, but inwardly you feel heavy, tense, or constantly restless without knowing why. Buddhism teaches that this inner weight is not caused by emotions themselves, but by our resistance to them. Most people try to escape uncomfortable emotions. They distract themselves, suppress their feelings, or judge themselves for having them. But in doing so, emotions do not disappear. They stay trapped in the body and mind. Buddhist self-care offers a different approach, mindful awareness. This means learning to gently observe your emotions without labeling them as good or bad. Instead of saying, "I am angry," or "I am broken," you learn to say, "Anger is present," or "Sadness is here right now." This small shift creates space between you and the emotion. You stop identifying with it, and it slowly loses its grip on you. Mindful awareness teaches you that emotions are temporary experiences, not permanent truths. When you sit with an emotion calmly without reacting, suppressing, or dramatizing it, you begin to see its nature. It rises, stays for a while, and eventually fades. This understanding is deeply freeing. You realize you do not need to fight your emotions or be controlled by them. You simply need to witness them with patience and compassion. Over time, this practice clears emotional clutter, the same way opening windows clears a dusty room. Letting go through awareness does not mean revisiting the past or reopening wounds endlessly. It means allowing what is already inside you to be seen and released naturally. When emotions are acknowledged, they soften. When they are ignored, they harden. Buddhist self-care helps you develop the courage to sit with yourself as you are, even when it is uncomfortable. This courage slowly transforms pain into understanding and confusion into clarity. As emotional clutter dissolves, your inner world becomes quieter. You respond instead of reacting. You think more clearly. You stop carrying yesterday's pain into today's moments. Reinvention happens here not through force, but through gentle attention. By learning to observe your inner life without judgment, you free yourself from emotional baggage and make space for calm, balance, and renewal. 3. Simplify your life to restore inner balance. In Buddhism, simplicity is not about giving things up out of punishment or discipline. It is about creating space for peace to return. Much of the exhaustion people feel today is not only physical, but mental and emotional. Your mind is constantly overstimulated by noise, information, expectations, responsibilities, and endless comparison. Even when nothing is happening outwardly, your inner world is crowded. Buddhism teaches that when life becomes too complex, the mind loses its natural balance. Self-care, then, begins with the gentle act of simplifying. Simplifying your life means honestly looking at what drains you and questioning whether it truly deserves your energy. Many people live on autopilot, saying yes to obligations they resent, maintaining relationships that exhaust them, and filling their days with activities that leave them feeling empty. Over time, this constant overextension creates anxiety, irritability, and emotional numbness. Buddhism reminds us that your energy is limited, and how you spend it determines the quality of your life. Choosing simplicity is choosing to protect your inner peace. This habit starts with small, conscious changes. It may mean reducing unnecessary conversations, limiting exposure to social media, or creating quiet moments in your day where nothing is demanded of you. It may mean letting go of possessions that clutter your space and, in turn, clutter your mind. When your external environment becomes calmer, your internal world follows. A simplified life gives your nervous system a chance to relax, allowing your body and mind to heal from constant tension. Buddhist self-care also encourages simplifying your inner life. This means releasing the need to overthink every decision, replay every mistake, or plan every possible future outcome. When you let go of mental excess, you begin to experience clarity. You stop chasing stimulation and start appreciating stillness. You realize that peace does not come from having more, but from needing less. Simplification does not mean withdrawing from life or avoiding responsibility. It means living intentionally. You begin to choose quality over quantity, fewer commitments, deeper focus, fewer distractions, more presence. As your life becomes less crowded, you regain a sense of control and calm. Your mind becomes clearer, your emotions steadier, and your actions more aligned with what truly matters to you. Reinvention often happens quietly through simplicity. When you remove what is unnecessary, what remains becomes clear. You rediscover your natural rhythm. You remember who you are beneath the noise. By simplifying your life, you are not losing anything of value. You are making space for balance, clarity, and a deeper connection to yourself. 4. Practice non-attachment to outcomes and learn to trust life. One of the deepest causes of stress, anxiety, and disappointment in life is the constant attachment to outcomes. You work hard, make plans, set goals, and then silently demand that life unfold exactly the way you expect. When it does not, frustration arises. You feel cheated, anxious, or defeated. Buddhism teaches that suffering does not come from effort itself, but from clinging to results. The mind wants guarantees, it wants certainty, it wants control over the future. But life, by its nature, is uncertain. When you try to control what cannot be controlled, the mind becomes tense and exhausted. Non-attachment to outcomes does not mean giving up on your goals or becoming passive. It means learning to separate your inner peace from external results. In Buddhism, you are encouraged to act with sincerity, care, and full effort, but without tying your happiness to success or failure. You plant the seed, water it, and care for it, but you do not shout at the soil demanding it to grow faster. This understanding is a powerful form of self-care because it protects your heart from constant emotional turbulence. When you cling to outcomes, every delay feels like a personal failure. Every obstacle feels like rejection. Your mind constantly swings between hope and fear. But when you practice non-attachment, you remain grounded, regardless of what happens. You learn to trust that effort is always meaningful, even when results are delayed or different than expected. This trust brings a deep sense of inner stability. You stop measuring your worth by achievements and begin to value your sincerity, patience, and presence. Buddhist teachings remind us that much of life unfolds beyond our control. People change, circumstances shift, opportunities appear and disappear. When you release the illusion that everything must go according to your plan, your mind relaxes. You stop forcing life and start cooperating with it. This does not make you weak, it makes you flexible. Like water, you learn to flow around obstacles instead of breaking against them. Practicing non-attachment also teaches emotional maturity. You begin to respond to success with gratitude instead of arrogance, and to failure with understanding instead of self-hatred. You realize that outcomes are temporary, but your inner state is something you carry everywhere. By letting go of rigid expectations, you free yourself from constant disappointment and anxiety. Reinvention happens here as you shift from control to trust, from fear to acceptance, and from tension to calm awareness. When you stop clinging to outcomes, life feels lighter. You act with clarity, not desperation. You move forward without carrying the heavy burden of what if. In this way, non-attachment becomes a quiet strength, a deep self-care practice that allows you to grow without losing yourself in the process. 5. Let go daily through stillness, silence, and deep inner rest. In Buddhism, true letting go does not happen once in a dramatic moment. It happens slowly, gently, and repeatedly. Each day, you accumulate mental noise, emotional residue, and subtle tension without realizing it. Conversations linger in your mind. Worries follow you into the night. Regrets from the past and fears about the future quietly pile up. Even when your body rests, your mind continues to carry weight. Buddhism teaches that without daily release, this inner accumulation slowly shapes your identity. You begin to feel tired without knowing why, irritated without clear cause, and disconnected from yourself without understanding how it happened. This is why stillness and silence are not luxuries in Buddhism. They are necessities for inner health. Stillness is not about doing nothing. It is about allowing your nervous system to return to its natural state. When you sit in stillness without scrolling, speaking, planning, or solving, you give your mind permission to soften. At first, this can feel uncomfortable. Thoughts may become louder. Restlessness may arise. You may feel the urge to escape. Buddhism teaches that this discomfort is not a problem. It is a sign that you are finally listening. Stillness brings you face to face with what has been ignored, and only what is acknowledged can be released. Silence works in a similar way. In a world that constantly demands your attention, silence becomes a form of self-respect. When you choose moments of silence, you step out of reaction mode. You stop feeding unnecessary thoughts with words. You stop reinforcing old stories about yourself. Silence gently dissolves the identities you cling to. You no longer need to explain yourself, defend yourself, or define yourself. In silence, you simply are. Buddhism teaches that the more you speak unnecessarily, the more you strengthen the ego. The more you sit in silence, the more the ego loosens its grip. Daily stillness allows yesterday to end properly. Without it, you carry yesterday's emotions into today and today's emotions into tomorrow. Over time, this creates emotional fatigue. Through quiet sitting, mindful breathing, or simple awareness of the present moment, you allow the mind to empty itself naturally. Thoughts come and go, feelings rise and fall. You do not chase them. You do not resist them. You simply watch. This watching is not passive, it is deeply healing. It teaches you that you are not your thoughts. You are the awareness behind them. Buddhist self-care emphasizes consistency over intensity. Even a few minutes of daily stillness, practiced sincerely, can slowly reshape your inner world. With regular practice, you begin to notice subtle changes. You react less. You pause more. You feel less urgency to fix everything immediately. Silence becomes a place of refuge instead of something to avoid. You no longer fear being alone with yourself because you begin to trust your inner space. Letting go through stillness also teaches patience. Many people expect immediate peace and feel frustrated when their mind does not quiet instantly. Buddhism reminds us that the mind has been conditioned for years, sometimes decades. It cannot unwind overnight. Each moment of stillness is like placing a heavy bag down after a long journey. You may not feel relief immediately, but your body remembers. Your mind remembers. Slowly, the burden lightens. This habit also reconnects you with intuition. When noise fades, inner wisdom becomes audible. You begin to sense what truly matters and what does not. Decisions feel clearer. Desires become simpler. You stop being pulled in 100 directions. Silence reveals the difference between what you want and what you have been conditioned to chase. In this way, stillness becomes not only rest, but guidance. Perhaps most importantly, daily letting go through silence teaches you how to return to yourself. Life will always be uncertain. Problems will arise. People will disappoint you. Circumstances will change. But when you have a daily practice of stillness, you always know where to return. You carry a quiet center within you that cannot be shaken easily. Reinvention happens here, not through effort, but through release. You are not building a new self. You are shedding layers of tension, expectation, and fear that were never truly you. In Buddhism, enlightenment is often described not as gaining something, but as removing what blocks clear seeing. Stillness removes these blocks gently, without force. Day by day, silence washes away the dust of living. You begin to feel lighter, clearer, and more grounded. Letting go becomes natural, not dramatic. And in that quiet, unforced release, you rediscover a version of yourself that feels calm, present, and whole. This is the deepest form of self-care, learning how to lay down the mind's burdens each day so you do not have to carry yesterday into tomorrow. Through stillness and silence, you do not escape life. You meet it with clarity and peace. 6. Let go of the need to control others and be at peace with their paths. One of the most hidden sources of suffering in life is the need to control how others think, behave, change, or understand you. In Buddhism, this attachment is rarely discussed openly, yet it quietly drains enormous emotional energy. You may not notice it at first, but much of your frustration comes from expectations placed on people, expecting them to heal at your pace, to appreciate you the way you deserve, to behave more consciously, to choose differently, or to see the world as you do. When they don't, disappointment arises, anger follows, resentment builds, and slowly your inner peace erodes. Buddhism teaches that every being is on their own path, shaped by their own karma, conditioning, fears, and awareness. Trying to control others is like trying to stop the wind with your hands. You exhaust yourself, yet nothing truly changes. This is why letting go of control is not weakness, it is wisdom. It is a profound form of self-care that frees you from emotional entanglement and constant inner conflict. Many people believe that if they stop trying to control others, they will be walked over or disrespected. Buddhism does not teach passivity, it teaches clarity. Letting go of control does not mean tolerating harm or abandoning boundaries. It means understanding where your responsibility ends. You are responsible for your actions, your intentions, your responses. You are not responsible for fixing, saving, or awakening others. When you take responsibility for what was never yours to carry, you slowly lose yourself. This habit begins with awareness. Notice how often your mind replays conversations, imagines different responses, or fantasizes about how someone should have behaved. Notice how much time is spent wishing people were different. Each of these thoughts is a form of attachment. Buddhism teaches that clinging to how things should be instead of accepting how they are creates suffering. Acceptance does not mean approval. It means seeing reality clearly, without illusion. Letting go of control also heals emotional dependency. Many people tie their happiness to how others treat them. A kind word lifts them. A cold response ruins their day. Buddhism invites you to reclaim your emotional independence. When you stop needing others to validate your worth, you become internally stable. Your peace no longer rises and falls with someone else's mood or choices. This is not emotional numbness, it is emotional maturity. This practice also deepens compassion. When you release the need to change others, you begin to see them more clearly. You recognize their wounds, fears, and limitations without taking them personally. You stop interpreting everything as an attack or rejection. Compassion arises naturally, not from superiority, but from understanding. You realize that people act from their level of awareness, not from an intention to hurt you. This understanding softens the heart while protecting it at the same time. Buddhist self-care emphasizes inner freedom. As long as you are trying to control others, your freedom is compromised. Your mind remains trapped in reaction. But when you let go, something profound happens. Your attention returns to where it belongs, your own inner life. You start asking better questions. Instead of, "Why are they like this?" you ask, "Why am I suffering because of this?" Instead of, "How can I change them?" you ask, "What is this teaching me about attachment?" These questions lead to growth instead of frustration. Letting go of control also teaches humility. You realize that you too are imperfect, learning, and conditioned. Just as you struggle with habits and blind spots, so does everyone else. This humility removes harsh judgment, both toward others and toward yourself. You stop expecting perfection from people and from life. With fewer expectations, disappointment loses its power. Over time, this habit creates emotional spaciousness. You feel lighter in relationships. You listen more and react less. You speak when necessary and remain silent when it preserves peace. You no longer feel compelled to explain yourself endlessly or force understanding. You allow others to misunderstand you without losing your sense of self. This is a deep inner strength that Buddhism values greatly. Reinvention happens here in a quiet but powerful way. When you stop trying to control the world, you finally gain control over yourself. Your energy returns. Your mind becomes clearer. Your heart becomes calmer. You no longer waste precious life force on resistance. Instead, you live with acceptance, discernment, and inner steadiness. Letting go of control is not about withdrawing from life. It is about participating without attachment. You love without possession. You care without clinging. You act without forcing outcomes. This balance is the heart of Buddhist self-care. In releasing the burden of controlling others, you reclaim your peace, your clarity, and your freedom. And in that freedom, reinvention is complete, not because the world changed, but because you did. 7. Let go of the past and stop carrying what has already ended. One of the most painful habits of the human mind is its tendency to live backward. Long after moments have passed, the mind continues to revisit them, replaying words that were said, decisions that were made, chances that were missed, and versions of life that no longer exist. In Buddhism, this attachment to the past is recognized as a deep source of suffering. The past cannot be changed, yet the mind clings to it as if revisiting it enough times will somehow rewrite it. This constant return to what has already ended quietly steals your present life. Many people believe they are learning from the past, but often they are simply reliving it. They punish themselves with regret, shame, and guilt, mistaking self-criticism for responsibility. Buddhism teaches that wisdom is not found in endlessly repeating the past, but in understanding it once clearly, honestly, and then letting it go. When the past becomes a place you live instead of a place you learned from, it becomes a burden that grows heavier with time. Letting go of the past does not mean denying what happened. It does not mean pretending pain did not exist or that loss did not matter. Buddhism never asks you to bypass your experience. Instead, it asks you to stop identifying with it. You are not your mistakes. You are not your worst moments. You are not the person you were when you acted from fear, confusion, or limited awareness. Holding on to the past is often a way of holding on to an old identity, even when that identity hurts you. The mind clings to the past because it feels familiar. Even pain can feel safer than uncertainty. Buddhism teaches that the ego prefers a painful known story over an unknown future. This is why people repeatedly return to old wounds they know how to suffer there. Letting go requires courage, because it means stepping into the present without the armor of old explanations. It means allowing yourself to be new. Buddhist self-care invites you to gently release the habit of mental time travel. Each time the mind drifts into regret or rumination, You learn to return to the present moment. You anchor yourself in what is happening now, your breath, your body, your surroundings. This is not avoidance, it is grounding. Over time, this practice teaches the mind that peace exists only here, not in memory or imagination. Letting go of the past also means forgiving yourself. Many people hold on to old mistakes as a form of self-punishment, believing they must suffer to atone. Buddhism teaches that suffering does not purify it, only prolongs ignorance. True growth comes from understanding why you acted as you did, seeing the fear or lack of awareness behind it, and choosing differently now. Compassion toward yourself is not indulgence, it is clarity. When you forgive yourself, you stop reliving who you were and make space for who you are becoming. This habit also applies to emotional attachments to people and situations that have ended. Relationships, opportunities, phases of life, everything changes. Yet the mind resists impermanence. It clings to what once felt safe, even when it no longer exists. Buddhism reminds us that clinging to what has passed is like holding on to a shadow. It drains energy without offering nourishment. Letting go does not erase love or meaning, it releases suffering from attachment. As you practice letting go of the past, you may notice moments of sadness or grief arise. This is natural. Buddhism does not teach emotional suppression. It teaches allowing emotions to move through you without building a permanent home inside you. Grief acknowledged can heal. Grief resisted becomes stagnation. By allowing feelings to rise and pass, you prevent the past from crystallizing into your identity. Over time, this practice transforms your relationship with memory. The past becomes a teacher, not a prison. You remember without reliving. You reflect without reopening wounds. You carry lessons instead of weight. This shift brings tremendous lightness. The mind becomes quieter. The heart becomes less guarded. Life begins to feel possible again. Reinvention happens here in a profound way. When you stop dragging the past into the present finally has room to unfold. You respond to life as it is, not as it once was. You stop expecting yesterday's disappointments to repeat themselves today. You become open again, curious, alive, and receptive. In Buddhism, freedom is not found in fixing the past, but in releasing it. Each moment you choose presence over memory, you reclaim a piece of your life. Letting go of what has ended does not make you forgetful or careless, it makes you free. And in that freedom, a new way of being quietly begins. This is the final self-care habit of reinvention, learning how to close chapters without tearing pages out of yourself. When you allow the past to rest, you give your future permission to arrive. 8. Let go of the need to be understood and learn to live from inner truth. One of the most subtle yet deeply exhausting attachments a person carries is the need to be understood. You want people to see your intentions, recognize your effort, acknowledge your pain, and validate your choices. When they don't, something inside you tightens. You replay conversations in your head, wishing you had explained yourself better. You feel frustrated, unseen, or misunderstood. In Buddhism, this attachment is recognized as a hidden source of suffering because it places your inner peace in the hands of other people's perceptions, something you can never fully control. From a young age, most people are conditioned to seek approval. You learn that being accepted feels safe, and being misunderstood feels threatening. Over time, this conditioning turns into an inner habit, constantly adjusting yourself to be seen in a certain way. You explain, you justify, you defend, you over-communicate. You soften your truth or exaggerate it, depending on what you think will be accepted. Slowly, without realizing it, you begin living outward instead of inward. Buddhism teaches that this outward orientation pulls you away from your center. The need to be understood is closely tied to identity. You want others to recognize who you believe you are. When they don't, it feels like a personal rejection. But Buddhism reminds us that every person sees the world through their own conditioning, wounds, and limitations. Expecting to be fully understood by everyone is unrealistic and emotionally costly. People hear you through the filter of their experiences, not your intentions. This is not cruelty, it is simply how the human mind works. Letting go of the need to be understood does not mean becoming silent out of fear or shrinking yourself. It means releasing the emotional dependence on other people's agreement. You begin to speak from clarity rather than desperation. You share when it feels aligned, not when you feel compelled to prove something. When you stop needing validation, your words become calmer, fewer, and more honest. Buddhism values this simplicity of expression because it reflects inner stability. This habit of letting go begins with awareness. Notice how often your mind wants to correct how others see you. Notice the urge to explain your choices, your boundaries, your healing, your growth. Ask yourself gently, why do I need them to understand this? Often, beneath the urge is fear, fear of rejection, fear of being judged, fear of being alone in your truth. Buddhism teaches that these fears lose their power when you stop feeding them with constant justification. Living from inner truth means trusting your own clarity. It means knowing why you choose what you choose, even if no one else agrees. This does not make you rigid or arrogant. It makes you grounded. When your actions align with your values, you no longer need external approval to feel at peace. You stop outsourcing your self-worth. You stop negotiating your authenticity. This practice also brings deep emotional freedom. When you let go of the need to be understood, misunderstandings no longer feel like personal attacks. You allow people to hold their opinions without feeling the need to change them. You recognize that disagreement does not equal disrespect. You conserve energy that was previously spent defending your identity. That energy returns to you as calm, focus, and self-respect. Buddhism teaches that silence can be more powerful than explanation. Not every truth needs to be spoken. Not every misunderstanding needs to be corrected. Wisdom lies in knowing when to speak and when to remain quiet. When you are at peace with yourself, you do not feel threatened by misinterpretation. You allow life to unfold without constantly narrating or justifying it. Letting go of the need to be understood also deepens compassion. When you stop demanding understanding from others, you naturally become more understanding yourself. You listen without needing to convince. You accept differences without feeling diminished. You see others as fellow travelers, each moving at their own pace. This perspective softens the heart while strengthening the spine. This habit is especially powerful for reinvention because it frees you from old roles. Often, the people who knew you in the past expect you to remain the same. When you change, they may misunderstand or resist your growth. Buddhism teaches that you do not need permission to evolve. When you let go of the need to be understood by those who only know your old self, you allow your transformation to continue without resistance. Over time, this practice creates a deep sense of inner alignment. You feel less reactive, less defensive, less anxious about how you are perceived. Your life becomes quieter but richer. You stop performing your healing and start living it. You stop explaining your path and start walking it. Reinvention reaches a new depth here. When you no longer seek understanding from the outside, you become deeply understood on the inside. You know who you are, what you value, and why you move the way you do. This inner knowing becomes your anchor. Opinions lose their weight. Silence becomes comfortable. Solitude becomes nourishing. In Buddhism, true freedom is not found in being seen. It is found in being aligned. When you let go of the need to be understood, you step fully into your own life. You live from truth rather than approval. And in that quiet, steady alignment, reinvention completes itself not as something you announce to the world, but as something you embody every day. 9. Let go of self-judgment and learn to treat yourself with compassion. One of the deepest and most damaging habits a person carries is harsh self-judgment. Long after external criticism fades, the inner critic continues its work, questioning your worth, replaying your mistakes, and measuring you against impossible standards. In Buddhism, this constant self-judgment is recognized as a subtle form of violence against the self. It may appear as discipline or self-awareness, but in truth, it quietly erodes peace, confidence, and clarity. Reinvention becomes impossible when you are constantly at war with yourself. From early life, many people learn to motivate themselves through criticism. You tell yourself that being hard on yourself will make you stronger, more disciplined, or more successful. But Buddhism teaches the opposite. Growth rooted in self-hatred leads only to exhaustion and fear. When your inner voice is cruel, the mind becomes tense and defensive. Instead of learning from mistakes, you shrink from them. Instead of evolving, you freeze. Self-judgment does not create change, it creates paralysis. Letting go of self-judgment begins with recognizing how automatic it has become. Notice how quickly your mind labels experiences as failure. Notice how easily you call yourself weak, slow, behind, or broken. These thoughts often feel factual, but they are habits, not truths. Buddhism teaches that thoughts are conditioned patterns arising from past experiences, not accurate reflections of who you are. When you see this clearly, you begin to loosen their grip. Compassion in Buddhism is not reserved for others. It begins with yourself. Self-compassion means meeting your own pain with understanding instead of punishment. It means acknowledging that you acted from the level of awareness you had at the time. You were doing the best you could with what you knew, what you felt, and what you were capable of in that moment. This understanding does not excuse harmful behavior. It creates the conditions for genuine growth. When you replace self-judgment with curiosity, something powerful happens. Instead of asking, "What is wrong with me?" you ask, "What was happening inside me?" This shift opens the door to insight. You begin to see the fear, confusion, or unmet needs behind your actions. Compassion allows you to learn without shame. It transforms mistakes into teachers rather than weapons. Buddhism emphasizes that suffering increases when you add resistance to pain. Self-judgment is a form of resistance. You are not only experiencing difficulty, you are also telling yourself you shouldn't be struggling. This double burden is what makes pain unbearable. When you allow yourself to be imperfect without condemnation, suffering softens. You still experience challenges, but they no longer define you. Letting go of self-judgment also heals the body. Constant inner criticism keeps the nervous system in a state of threat. The body remains tense, alert, and exhausted. Compassion, on the other hand, signals safety. When you speak to yourself gently, your body relaxes, your breath deepens, your mind clears. Buddhist self-care recognizes this connection between inner dialogue and physical well-being. This habit also transforms motivation. When you stop attacking yourself, you do not become complacent, you become sincere. Actions begin to arise from care instead of fear. You choose healthy behaviors, not to punish yourself, but to support yourself. Discipline becomes an act of kindness rather than control. This kind of motivation is sustainable because it is rooted in respect. Self-compassion also changes how you relate to others. When you stop judging yourself harshly, you naturally judge others less. you become more patient, more understanding, and less reactive. Buddhism teaches that how you treat yourself becomes the blueprint for how you treat the world. Inner kindness radiates outward. Letting go of self-judgment is especially important during reinvention because change often brings uncertainty and mistakes. If every misstep is met with self-attack, you will retreat to what is familiar, even if it no longer serves you. Compassion gives you the courage to keep going. It allows you to try again without losing faith in yourself. Over time, this practice builds a stable inner foundation. You stop defining yourself by success or failure. You begin to see yourself as a work in progress, worthy of care at every stage. This perspective brings a deep sense of peace. You no longer need to prove your worth because you no longer doubt it. In Buddhism, liberation is not about becoming perfect. It is about ending unnecessary suffering. Letting go of self-judgment is one of the most direct ways to do this. When you meet yourself with compassion, you stop fighting your own existence. Reinvention becomes gentle instead of brutal, steady instead of forced. Ultimately, this habit teaches you how to be your own refuge. When life becomes difficult, you do not abandon yourself. You stay present, you stay kind, you stay grounded. And from that place of inner safety, true transformation unfolds not because you hated who you were, but because you finally learned how to care. 10. Let go of fear of impermanence and learn to flow with change. At the deepest level of human suffering lies the fear of impermanence. You want things to stay the same because sameness feels safe. When life is familiar, the mind relaxes. When things begin to change, even in small ways, fear quietly arises. Buddhism teaches that this fear is not a flaw in you, it is a misunderstanding of how life works. Everything that exists is changing, whether you notice it or not. The problem is not change itself, the problem is your resistance to it. Reinvention becomes painful only when you try to hold still in a moving world. From an early age, you are taught to build certainty. You are encouraged to secure your future, define yourself clearly, and create stable identities. While this can be useful for practical living, it often creates emotional attachment to things that cannot last. You begin to believe that happiness depends on keeping people, roles, achievements, and conditions exactly as they are. When something shifts, a relationship ends, a phase of life closes, your identity evolves, the mind reacts with panic. Buddhism teaches that this panic comes from clinging, not from loss itself. Impermanence means that everything changes. Your thoughts, your emotions, your body, your circumstances, and even your sense of self. When you resist this truth, you suffer continuously. You replay the past, fearing its loss. You worry about the future, fearing its arrival. You try to freeze moments that were never meant to last. Buddhism gently reminds you that life is not something to be held, it is something to be experienced as it flows. Fear of impermanence often keeps people trapped. You may stay in relationships that no longer nourish you because you are afraid of the unknown. You may cling to old versions of yourself because change threatens your identity. You may resist growth because growth requires letting go of what feels familiar. Buddhism teaches that clinging does not prevent change, it only makes change more painful. Whether you hold on or not, life continues to move. Letting go simply allows you to move with it, instead of being dragged. Learning to flow with change begins with awareness. Notice how everything in your experience is already shifting. Thoughts arise and disappear on their own. Emotions change throughout the day. Energy rises and falls. Even pain is not constant, it comes in waves. Buddhism teaches that when you observe impermanence directly, rather than thinking about it conceptually, fear begins to soften. You realize that change is not an enemy, it is the natural rhythm of existence. Letting go of fear does not mean becoming indifferent or detached from life. Buddhism does not teach emotional numbness. It teaches wise engagement. You still love, you still care, you still commit, but you do so without the illusion that things must remain unchanged to be meaningful. In fact, understanding impermanence makes love deeper. You appreciate people more fully because you know nothing is guaranteed. You become present because you understand moments are fleeting. Impermanence also applies to suffering. One of the most comforting teachings in Buddhism is that pain does not last forever. No state, no emotion, no difficulty remains fixed. When you truly understand this, you stop panicking during hard times. You stop telling yourself that things will always feel this way. You learn to breathe through discomfort instead of resisting it. This acceptance does not remove pain immediately, but it prevents despair. You allow experiences to pass through you without becoming your identity. Fear of impermanence often shows up as fear of losing control. You want to know what will happen next. You want assurance that things will turn out well. Buddhism teaches that life has never been under your control in the first place. Trying to control the uncontrollable only creates tension. When you accept uncertainty, your mind relaxes. You stop exhausting yourself with endless what-if thinking. You begin to trust the unfolding, not because it is predictable, but because you are learning to respond wisely to whatever arises. Flowing with change also means allowing yourself to change. Many people suffer because they believe they must remain consistent to be authentic. Buddhism teaches that there is no fixed self to protect. You are allowed to evolve. You are allowed to outgrow beliefs, relationships, and versions of yourself. Change does not mean you were wrong before it means you are alive now. When you stop clinging to old identities, reinvention becomes natural rather than frightening. This practice builds resilience. When you accept impermanence, setbacks no longer feel like personal failures. You understand that cycles of growth and loss are part of life. You become less shocked when things end and less attached when things begin. This emotional balance allows you to navigate life with steadiness. You bend without breaking. You adapt without losing your center. Living with awareness of impermanence also deepens gratitude. When you know nothing lasts forever, you stop postponing appreciation. You stop assuming there will always be more time. You listen more attentively. You love more openly. You engage with life more sincerely. Buddhism teaches that impermanence is not a reason to despair, it is a reason to be fully present. Reinvention reaches its deepest point here. When you let go of fear of impermanence, you stop resisting life's movement. You stop demanding stability from what is naturally fluid. You trust that endings make space for beginnings, even when you cannot yet see them. You learn to stand in uncertainty without collapsing. In Buddhism, peace is not found by stopping change, but by understanding it. Impermanence is not a mistake in life's design. It is the reason healing, growth, and transformation are possible. When you stop fighting change, you discover a quiet strength within yourself that moves with life instead of against it. Letting go of fear of impermanence does not mean losing everything. It means losing the illusion that anything was meant to be held forever. And in releasing that illusion, you gain something far greater: the ability to live freely, openly, and fully in each unfolding moment. 11. Let go of the need to rush and learn to trust your own timing. One of the quietest yet most destructive forms of suffering is the constant feeling that you are late, behind, or not where you are supposed to be. You look around and see others moving faster, achieving sooner, settling earlier, or appearing more certain. Without realizing it, you internalize an invisible clock that tells you how your life should unfold. Buddhism teaches that this sense of urgency is not wisdom, it is anxiety disguised as motivation. Reinvention becomes deeply painful when you believe you are racing against time instead of walking with it. From a young age, you are conditioned to rush, finish quickly, decide early, achieve fast, keep up. This conditioning creates a permanent background pressure in the mind. Even during moments of rest, you feel guilty. Even during growth, you feel impatient. Buddhism identifies this restlessness as a form of craving, the craving to arrive somewhere else instead of being where you are. The irony is that rushing never brings peace, it only postpones it. Letting go of the need to rush begins with recognizing that growth has its own rhythm. In nature, nothing blooms before its season. A seed does not become a tree by force. Yet humans often expect themselves to heal, mature, and transform on unrealistic timelines. You want clarity now, you want confidence now, you want results now. Buddhism gently reminds you that forcing development only creates fragility. What grows too fast often cannot support itself. This habit of rushing is often fueled by comparison. You measure your progress against others without seeing their full journey. You compare your inner confusion to their outer certainty. Buddhism teaches that comparison is ignorance because no two paths are the same. Each person carries different conditioning, lessons, and karmic patterns. When you rush to match someone else's pace, you abandon your own path. This abandonment creates inner conflict and self-doubt. Trusting your own timing is a profound act of self-care. It means accepting that not everything is meant to happen at once. Some lessons require repetition, some insights require patience. Some transformations happen slowly, quietly, and invisibly before they ever show results. Buddhism teaches that when you stop pressuring yourself to arrive, you begin to live more fully along the way. Letting go of urgency also heals decision-making. When you rush, decisions are often driven by fear, fear of missing out, fear of being left behind, fear of wasting time. Buddhism encourages decisions rooted in clarity instead of panic. When you slow down, you hear your intuition more clearly. You choose based on alignment rather than anxiety. This leads to fewer regrets and greater inner stability. This practice also softens self-judgment. When you believe you are behind, you criticize yourself harshly. You label yourself as slow, unmotivated, or broken. Buddhism teaches that this judgment is based on an imagined timeline, not reality. There is no universal schedule for becoming yourself. When you release this illusion, you stop attacking your own process. Compassion replaces pressure. Patience replaces frustration. Learning to trust timing does not mean becoming passive or avoiding effort. Buddhism does not teach waiting instead of acting. It teaches acting without desperation. You still show up, you still practice, you still take steps forward. But you do so without the inner violence of constant urgency. Action becomes steady rather than frantic. Progress becomes sustainable rather than exhausting. Letting go of the need to rush also transforms your relationship with uncertainty. Often, rushing is an attempt to escape, not knowing. You want answers now, so you don't have to sit with discomfort. Buddhism teaches that uncertainty is not a problem to solve. It is a space to inhabit. When you allow yourself to not know, wisdom begins to emerge naturally. Clarity comes not from forcing conclusions, but from allowing understanding to mature. This habit also deepens presence. When you stop rushing, you begin to notice life again. You listen more carefully. You experience moments more fully. You stop treating the present as an obstacle to the future. Buddhism teaches that the present moment is not a waiting room. It is the only place life actually happens. Reinvention does not occur somewhere ahead. It unfolds here, breath by breath. Trusting your timing also means honoring rest. Many people rush because they believe rest is wasted time. Buddhism recognizes rest as essential for insight and renewal. Without rest, the mind becomes rigid and reactive. When you allow yourself to pause without guilt, your inner world reorganizes itself. Creativity returns. Motivation becomes authentic. You move forward with greater clarity. Over time, letting go of urgency creates a deep sense of inner safety. You stop feeling chased by life. You stop measuring yourself constantly. You begin to trust that what is meant for you will unfold when you are ready, not when you are panicking. This trust reduces anxiety and builds confidence that is not dependent on speed or comparison. Reinvention matures here. When you stop rushing to become someone else, you allow yourself to fully inhabit who you are becoming. You respect the unfolding. You cooperate with growth instead of forcing it. Buddhism teaches that patience is not delay. It is alignment with reality. In the end, letting go of the need to rush is letting go of the belief that your worth is tied to speed. You are not late. You are not behind. You are exactly where your understanding has brought you. And when you learn to trust your timing, life stops feeling like a race and starts feeling like a journey, one that unfolds with meaning, depth, and quiet confidence. This is the final layer of reinvention, realizing that becoming yourself is not something you hurry toward, but something you allow step by step, moment by moment, exactly as you are. 12. Let go of the need to be perfect and learn to live authentically. One of the heaviest burdens a person carries, often without realizing it, is the need to be perfect. This need hides behind good intentions, wanting to do things right, wanting to be respected, wanting to avoid mistakes, wanting to be worthy of love. But in Buddhism, the pursuit of perfection is seen not as growth, but as a subtle form of suffering. Reinvention becomes exhausting when you believe you must fix every flaw before you are allowed to rest, love yourself, or feel at peace. From early life, many people are conditioned to associate worth with performance. You are praised when you succeed, corrected when you fail, and slowly taught that mistakes are dangerous. Over time, this conditioning turns inward. Even when no one is watching, the mind continues to judge, correct, and criticize. You begin to live under constant self-surveillance. Every action is evaluated. Every weakness is hidden. Every mistake feels like proof that you are not enough. Buddhism teaches that this inner pressure is not discipline. It is fear wearing a disciplined mask. Perfectionism creates a life lived in tension. You hesitate to start because you are afraid of doing it wrong. You overwork because you are afraid of being inadequate. You avoid vulnerability because you are afraid of being exposed. On the surface, perfectionism can look like ambition or responsibility, but beneath it lies anxiety. Buddhism teaches that when fear drives your actions, peace cannot follow. Letting go of the need to be perfect begins with understanding a simple truth. Perfection is an idea, not a reality. Nothing in nature is perfect, yet everything belongs. Trees grow unevenly. Rivers change course. Seasons arrive early or late. Buddhism points to nature as a teacher. Life unfolds beautifully, not because it is flawless, but because it is alive. When you demand perfection from yourself, you are demanding something that life itself does not offer. Authenticity, in contrast, is deeply aligned with Buddhist wisdom. To live authentically means allowing yourself to be real rather than ideal. It means acknowledging your strengths without exaggeration and your weaknesses without shame. Buddhism teaches that suffering arises when you reject parts of your own experience. When you allow yourself to be imperfect, you stop fighting reality. And when you stop fighting reality, peace becomes possible. The need to be perfect is often tied to fear of rejection. You believe that if you make mistakes, people will leave. If you show flaws, you will not be loved. Buddhism teaches that this belief creates isolation. You hide behind masks and roles, hoping to be accepted for something you are not. This distance from your true self slowly creates loneliness even in relationships. Letting go of perfection allows genuine connection because authenticity invites authenticity. Living authentically also means allowing yourself to learn through experience. Buddhism teaches that wisdom is not gained by avoiding mistakes, but by understanding them. When you let go of perfectionism, mistakes become information instead of condemnation. You ask, "What can I learn?" instead of, "What is wrong with me?" This shift transforms growth from a painful struggle into a natural process. Perfectionism also disconnects you from the present moment. You are always preparing for a future version of yourself that will finally be worthy. Buddhism reminds you that life is happening now. When you postpone self-acceptance until you are better, you miss the only moment where life can actually be lived. Letting go of perfection allows you to participate fully in the present, even while you are still learning. This habit of authenticity deeply heals the nervous system. When you no longer feel the need to constantly monitor yourself, your body relaxes. Your breath deepens. Your mind softens. Buddhist self-care recognizes that safety is not created by control, but by acceptance. When you allow yourself to be imperfect without punishment, your inner world becomes a place of refuge instead of judgment. Letting go of perfection does not mean abandoning effort or responsibility. Buddhism does not teach carelessness, it teaches sincerity. You still act with intention, you still try, you still grow. But your effort comes from care rather than fear. You improve because you respect yourself, not because you despise who you are. This kind of growth is sustainable because it is rooted in kindness. Authenticity also brings clarity. When you stop trying to appear perfect, you become honest about what you want, what you need, and what no longer serves you. You stop forcing yourself into paths that look good, but feel wrong. You listen more closely to your inner guidance. Buddhism teaches that truth is quiet, but persistent. It becomes audible when you stop performing. Over time, letting go of perfection creates emotional freedom. You are less defensive. You recover from setbacks more easily. You laugh at yourself more. You stop taking every flaw as a personal failure. This lightness allows creativity, curiosity, and joy to return. Life feels less like a test and more like an exploration. Reinvention reaches a profound depth here. When you no longer try to perfect yourself, you allow yourself to be whole. You stop fragmenting your identity into acceptable and unacceptable parts. You integrate rather than suppress. Buddhism teaches that wholeness is not achieved by removing flaws, but by embracing the full range of human experience with awareness. In the end, letting go of the need to be perfect is letting go of the belief that you must earn your right to exist. You are allowed to be here as you are learning, stumbling, growing, changing. Authenticity is not a final destination. It is a way of relating to yourself with honesty and compassion. This is the quiet liberation Buddhism points toward. When you stop trying to become flawless, you finally allow yourself to be real. And in being real, you discover a peace that perfection could never provide. 13. Let go of the illusion that you are separate and learn to feel deeply connected to life. One of the most subtle yet profound sources of suffering is the belief that you are alone, separate, and disconnected from life. This belief is rarely spoken out loud, but it quietly shapes how you see yourself and the world. You feel as if life is happening to you rather than with you. You feel isolated inside your thoughts, your struggles, your fears. Buddhism teaches that this sense of separation is an illusion created by the mind, and that much of human pain comes from forgetting our deep connection to everything around us. From early childhood, you are taught to see yourself as an individual unit, your problems, your success, your failure, your journey. While individuality has its place, Buddhism points to a deeper truth. Nothing exists independently. Every breath you take depends on the air around you. Every thought you have is shaped by experiences, relationships, culture, and time. Every moment of your life is supported by countless conditions you did not create. When you believe you are separate, you feel burdened by the idea that you must carry everything alone. This illusion of separation often creates emotional loneliness. Even when surrounded by people, you may feel unseen or disconnected. You may believe that no one truly understands your inner world. Buddhism teaches that this loneliness does not come from lack of connection, but from misunderstanding the nature of connection. When you see yourself as isolated, you expect others to fill a gap that does not actually exist. This expectation leads to disappointment and craving. Letting go of the illusion of separation begins with noticing interdependence. Buddhism teaches that everything arises due to causes and conditions. Your strengths did not appear from nowhere. Your struggles did not arise in isolation. Your personality, fears, desires, and beliefs are the result of countless influences: family, environment, experiences, even moments you barely remember. When you see this clearly, self-blame softens. You stop judging yourself as a standalone failure or success. You begin to understand yourself as part of a larger flow. This understanding also dissolves the harsh boundary between me and others. When you feel separate, you take things personally. You interpret disagreements as attacks and differences as threats. Buddhism teaches that when you see others as deeply conditioned beings just like you, compassion arises naturally. You stop asking, "Why are they like this?" and begin seeing, they are acting from their own pain, fear, and conditioning. This does not mean tolerating harm. It means responding with clarity instead of hatred. Letting go of separation also heals existential anxiety. Many fears, fear of death, fear of meaninglessness, fear of insignificance, are rooted in the idea that you are a small, isolated entity in a vast, indifferent universe. Buddhism offers a different view. You are not separate from life, you are an expression of it. Just as a wave is not separate from the ocean, you are not separate from the process of existence. When you understand this, fear begins to soften. You realize you are not alone in your becoming. This habit of remembering connection also changes how you relate to suffering. When you believe your pain is unique, you feel cursed or singled out. Buddhism teaches that suffering is a shared human experience. Loss, confusion, longing, and fear are not personal failures. They are universal conditions of being human. When you see your pain as part of the human experience, shame dissolves. You stop asking, "What is wrong with me?" and begin to understand, this is what it means to be alive. Feeling connected also brings humility and gratitude. You begin to see how much of your life is supported by unseen effort, by people you may never meet, by nature, by time, by countless small conditions aligning moment by moment. This awareness softens arrogance and self-centeredness. You stop believing you must control everything alone. You learn to receive life, not just manage it. Buddhism teaches that the illusion of separation is reinforced by constant mental storytelling. The mind narrates everything as my problem, my failure, my future. When you sit in mindful awareness, these stories quiet down. In silence, the sense of being a separate observer loosens. You begin to experience moments where boundaries soften, where you feel part of the moment instead of standing apart from it. These moments are not mystical fantasies, they are glimpses of reality without mental division. Letting go of separation also transforms purpose. When you believe you are isolated, Purpose becomes self-centered, what you must achieve, prove, or protect. Buddhism teaches that purpose naturally expands when you feel connected. Your actions begin to consider the whole, not just the self. Kindness becomes intuitive. Responsibility feels shared rather than heavy. You realize your life matters not because it stands alone, but because it participates in something larger. This understanding also changes how you face endings. When you see yourself as separate, endings feel like annihilation. Buddhism teaches that change is not disappearance, but transformation. Just as everything arises through conditions, everything continues through new forms. Letting go of separation allows you to meet change with less fear. You trust that nothing is truly lost, it only changes shape. Reinvention reaches a deep spiritual maturity here. When you stop seeing yourself as isolated, reinvention is no longer about fixing a broken individual. It becomes a realignment with life itself. You stop asking, "Who should I become?" and begin to ask, "How can I participate more fully, wisely, and compassionately in what is unfolding?" In the end, letting go of the illusion of separation brings a quiet, grounding peace. You no longer feel abandoned by life. You no longer feel like you must figure everything out alone. You feel supported by the same process that moves the sun, grows trees, and changes seasons. Buddhism teaches that awakening is not about escaping the world, but about realizing you were never separate from it. This is the final depth of reinvention, remembering that you belong not because you earned it, not because you perfected yourself, but because you were always part of the whole. When this understanding settles, life feels less heavy, less hostile, and more intimate. And from that place of deep connection, compassion, clarity, and peace arise naturally. 14. Let go of the story you keep telling yourself and learn to live beyond old narratives. One of the most invisible yet powerful forces shaping your life is the story you keep telling yourself about who you are, what has happened to you, and what your future will be. In Buddhism, this inner narrative is seen as a major source of suffering because it quietly locks you into a fixed identity that no longer reflects reality. You may believe you are simply being realistic, but often you are living inside a mental script written long ago during moments of pain, fear, failure, or disappointment. Reinvention becomes impossible when you keep rehearsing the same story and expecting a different life. From a very young age, the mind begins to collect experiences and turn them into meaning. A moment of rejection becomes, "I am not wanted." A failure becomes, "I am not good enough." A loss becomes, "Things never work out for me." Over time, these conclusions solidify into a personal narrative. You stop seeing them as interpretations and start treating them as facts. Buddhism teaches that this is how identity is constructed not from truth, but from repeated thought patterns reinforced by emotion. The danger of these stories is not that they are dramatic, but that they feel familiar. Familiarity gives them authority. You begin filtering every new experience through the same old lens. When something good happens, you doubt it. When something difficult happens, you say, "See, I knew it." In this way, the mind creates a closed loop where the past keeps recreating itself through expectation. Buddhism teaches that suffering continues not because the past was painful, but because it is being replayed in the present. Letting go of old narratives begins with awareness. You start noticing the phrases that repeat in your mind. "This always happens to me." "I'm just not that kind of person." "People can't be trusted." "I'll never change." These statements feel protective, as if they are shielding you from disappointment. But Buddhism teaches that they are actually limiting beliefs, masquerading as wisdom. They keep you emotionally safe at the cost of growth. These stories are especially powerful because they give the illusion of identity. You may not know who you are without them. Even painful stories provide a sense of consistency. Buddhism recognizes that the ego prefers a painful identity over uncertainty. Letting go of the story feels like stepping into emptiness. The mind resists this emptiness because it does not yet trust what might emerge in its place. Buddhist self-care invites you to question the narrative gently, without force. Instead of arguing with the story, you observe it. You notice when it arises. You notice the emotion attached to it. You notice how it shapes your reactions. Over time, you begin to see that the story is not happening now, it is a memory being replayed. This realization weakens its grip. You begin to experience moments where the story is absent, and in those moments, there is relief. Letting go of the story does not mean denying your experiences. Buddhism does not teach spiritual bypassing. What happened to you mattered. Pain was real. Loss was real. But the meaning you assign to those experiences is not fixed. You are allowed to update your understanding as your awareness grows. Buddhism teaches that clinging to old meanings is like carrying an outdated map in a changed landscape. Living beyond old narratives allows you to respond freshly to life. Instead of reacting based on expectation, you respond based on presence. You stop assuming how things will turn out. You allow people to show you who they are now, not who they were in the past. You allow yourself to act differently, without the burden of proving consistency. This freedom is deeply healing. This practice also transforms emotional pain. Much of what hurts you repeatedly is not the original event, but the story attached to it. When you let go of the narrative, pain becomes information instead of identity. You feel it, learn from it, and let it pass. Buddhism teaches that pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional, and suffering is often sustained by storytelling. Letting go of old narratives also changes how you imagine the future. When you stop assuming the future will repeat the past, hope becomes possible not as blind optimism, but as openness. You stop predicting failure. You stop bracing for disappointment. You allow uncertainty to exist without filling it with fear. Buddhism teaches that the future is not something to fear or control, but something to meet with awareness. This habit requires patience. Stories that were built over years do not dissolve overnight. Each time you notice the narrative and choose not to follow it, you weaken it. Each moment of presence interrupts the loop. Over time, the story loses its emotional charge. It becomes quieter, less convincing. You begin to experience yourself beyond the narrative as awareness, not as a character trapped in a plot. Reinvention deepens here. You are no longer trying to fix a broken story. You are stepping out of storytelling altogether. You live more directly. You respond instead of rehearsing. You experience instead of interpreting everything through the past. Buddhism teaches that freedom is not found in rewriting the story, but in realizing you were never the story to begin with. When you let go of the narrative, life feels lighter. You stop explaining yourself internally. You stop predicting outcomes. You stop reliving old scenes. You meet each moment with curiosity instead of expectation. This is not naivety, it is clarity. In the end, letting go of the story you keep telling yourself is one of the most profound acts of self-care. You are not erasing your past, you are releasing its authority over your present. You are not becoming someone new, you are uncovering what was always here beneath the noise of memory. This is the quiet liberation Buddhism points toward. When the story falls silent, life speaks directly. And in that direct experience, reinvention happens naturally without effort, without force, and without fear. 15. Let go of resistance to pain and learn to meet life with open awareness. One of the most deeply ingrained habits of the human mind is resistance to pain. When discomfort arises, emotional or physical, the immediate impulse is to escape it, suppress it, or distract yourself from it. You tell yourself that something has gone wrong, that pain should not be happening, that life is being unfair. In Buddhism, this resistance is recognized as one of the main reasons suffering intensifies. Pain itself is a natural part of being alive. Suffering begins when you fight against it. From an early age, you are taught to avoid discomfort at all costs. You are encouraged to stay positive, move on quickly, and hide vulnerability. Over time, this conditioning teaches the mind that pain is dangerous. When pain appears, fear follows. The mind tightens. Thoughts race. You judge yourself for feeling what you feel. Buddhism teaches that this reaction, this tightening and judging, is what turns temporary pain into prolonged suffering. Resistance creates a second layer of pain. The first layer is the experience itself: grief, loss, disappointment, fear, uncertainty. The second layer is the story you add. I shouldn't feel this way. This means I'm weak. This will never end. Something is wrong with me. This second layer is optional. Buddhism teaches that when you stop resisting pain, the second layer dissolves, and the experience becomes more workable, more humane, and less overwhelming. Letting go of resistance does not mean liking pain or seeking it out. Buddhism does not glorify suffering. It teaches honesty. Pain arises because life is impermanent, because attachment exists, because relationships matter, because expectations exist. To be alive is to be touched by difficulty. When you accept this truth, pain no longer feels like a personal failure. It becomes part of the human experience rather than a sign that you are broken. Meeting pain with open awareness means allowing it to be present without immediately trying to fix it. Instead of asking, "How do I make this go away?" you ask, "Can I be with this just as it is for this moment?" This shift is subtle but powerful. When you stop running, the mind begins to settle. The body softens. Pain, when allowed, often changes on its own. It moves. It breathes. It does not remain fixed unless you freeze it with fear. Buddhism teaches mindfulness of pain as a form of wisdom. When you observe pain directly without judgment, without labeling it as good or bad, you begin to see its impermanent nature. Sensations change. Emotions rise and fall. Even intense pain comes in waves. This observation brings relief, not because the pain disappears immediately, but because you are no longer fighting it. Energy that was spent resisting becomes available for understanding. Resistance often comes from fear of being overwhelmed. You worry that if you allow pain, it will consume you. Buddhism teaches that awareness is larger than any experience. Pain arises within awareness, but awareness is not limited by it. When you sit with pain gently, you discover that you can hold it without collapsing. This realization builds inner strength, not the aggressive kind, but the quiet confidence that comes from knowing you can face what arises. Letting go of resistance also transforms emotional healing. Many wounds remain unhealed not because they are too painful, but because they were never fully felt. Suppressed pain does not disappear. It hides and resurfaces in other forms: anxiety, numbness, anger, exhaustion. Buddhism teaches that healing requires contact. When you allow yourself to feel pain fully, without resistance, it completes its natural cycle. What is felt fully can be released. This practice also deepens compassion for yourself and for others. When you stop resisting your own pain, you stop fearing pain in others. You become more present with suffering instead of trying to fix or escape it. Buddhism teaches that true compassion is not about removing pain, but about meeting it with awareness and kindness. This applies inwardly first. Self-compassion begins when you allow yourself to be human without judgment. Letting go of resistance does not mean staying stuck in pain. It means allowing movement. Resistance creates stagnation. Acceptance allows flow. When you open to pain, it often softens, shifts, or reveals what it is asking for: rest, boundaries, truth, change. Pain becomes a messenger instead of an enemy. Buddhism teaches that every experience, even difficult ones, carries information. When you stop fighting, you can listen. This habit is especially important during reinvention. Change often involves discomfort. Old identities dissolve. Familiar patterns fall away. Uncertainty arises. If you resist this discomfort, you retreat into old habits. If you meet it with awareness, transformation continues. Buddhism teaches that growth is not always comfortable, but it does not have to be violent. When you stop resisting pain, change becomes less traumatic and more integrated. Meeting life with open awareness also changes how you experience joy. When you stop resisting pain, you stop clinging to pleasure. Both are forms of attachment. Buddhism teaches balance, allowing all experiences to arise and pass without grasping or pushing away. This balance creates equanimity, a steady inner state that remains present through highs and lows. Life becomes less dramatic and more real. Over time, letting go of resistance creates deep inner trust. You stop fearing your own experience. You know that whatever arises, you can meet it. This trust reduces anxiety and builds resilience. You no longer need to control life to feel safe. Safety comes from your ability to stay present. Reinvention reaches a profound maturity here. You are no longer trying to design a pain-free life. You are learning how to live fully, honestly, and wisely within life as it is. You stop asking for guarantees. You stop demanding comfort. You meet each moment with openness. In Buddhism, liberation is not the absence of pain, it is the absence of resistance. When resistance falls away, life flows more naturally, pain passes more cleanly. Joy is appreciated without clinging. You become intimate with life instead of armored against it. Letting go of resistance to pain is one of the most courageous acts of self-care. It is choosing truth over comfort, presence over avoidance, wisdom over fear. And in that openness, reinvention completes itself not as an escape from suffering, but as a deep capacity to live with clarity, compassion, and unshakable awareness. 16. Let go of comparison and learn to walk your own path with quiet confidence. One of the most draining habits of the human mind is constant comparison. You compare your progress to others, your struggles to their highlights, your inner confusion to their outer confidence. Even when you are moving forward, comparison whispers that it is not enough, not fast enough, not impressive enough. In Buddhism, comparison is seen as a form of ignorance, not because it is immoral, but because it distorts reality and steals peace. Reinvention becomes painful when your sense of worth depends on how you measure up against someone else's life. Comparison often begins innocently. You look around to understand where you stand, but slowly it turns into a habit. You scroll, observe, evaluate, and judge, sometimes consciously, often unconsciously. You begin to feel behind without knowing exactly why. You feel pressured without a clear source. Buddhism teaches that comparison is rooted in attachment to identity. You are not simply observing others, you are measuring yourself against an imagined standard that keeps shifting. The problem with comparison is not that people are different, it is that you forget context. You do not see what others carry, what they have lost, what they struggle with in silence, or what timing shaped their path. You see fragments and turn them into conclusions. Buddhism reminds you that every life unfolds according to different causes and conditions. Comparing two lives without understanding their full context is like comparing two trees without considering the soil they grew in. Comparison also feeds the illusion that life is a competition. You begin to believe there is a limited amount of success, peace, love, or recognition, and that someone else having more means you have less. Buddhism teaches that this scarcity mindset creates craving and resentment. You stop appreciating your own journey because you are too busy watching someone else's. This distraction pulls you away from your own life. Letting go of comparison begins with understanding that your path is not meant to look like anyone else's. Your timing, lessons, and growth are unique. Buddhism teaches that suffering arises when you resist your own reality and wish to be somewhere else. When you accept that your life is unfolding exactly as it needs to for your understanding, comparison loses its grip. Comparison often hides deeper fears. Fear of being left behind, fear of being insignificant, fear of not being enough. Buddhism teaches that these fears soften when you stop outsourcing your worth. Your value does not come from being ahead, admired, or validated. It comes from being present, sincere, and awake in your own experience. When you measure yourself internally instead of externally, stability arises. Letting go of comparison also restores focus. When you stop watching others constantly, your energy returns to you. You begin to notice your own progress, however small. You become aware of what truly matters to you, not what is trending or praised. Buddhism teaches that clarity comes when attention is reclaimed. You stop scattering your mind across other people's lives and bring it back home. This practice also changes how you relate to success. Instead of envying others, you can genuinely appreciate them. When comparison dissolves, jealousy loses its fuel. You understand that someone else's success does not diminish yours. Buddhism teaches sympathetic joy, finding happiness in the happiness of others as a path to inner freedom. This joy becomes possible only when you stop seeing life as a race. Letting go of comparison also heals self-judgment. Much of your inner criticism is borrowed. You criticize yourself for not meeting standards you never consciously chose. Buddhism teaches that these standards are often social constructs, not truths. When you release them, you stop attacking yourself for being human. You begin to respect your pace, your capacity, and your needs. Walking your own path requires courage. When you stop comparing, you may feel uncertain at first. Without external benchmarks, the ego feels lost. Buddhism teaches that this uncertainty is not a problem, it is a doorway. It invites you to listen inwardly instead of outwardly. Over time, you develop inner reference points. You know when something feels aligned or draining. You trust your own sense of direction. This habit also deepens authenticity. When you are no longer trying to keep up, you stop performing. You make choices based on truth rather than image. You allow yourself to want what you actually want, not what looks impressive. Buddhism teaches that authenticity is freedom from imitation. When you stop copying others' paths, your own becomes clear. Letting go of comparison also brings peace to relationships. You stop turning people into mirrors for self-evaluation. You see them as fellow travelers instead of rivals. This shift reduces tension and competition. Connections become more genuine. You listen without comparing. You celebrate without resentment. Buddhism teaches that harmony arises when the need to rank dissolves. Reinvention becomes grounded here. Instead of constantly adjusting yourself to measure up, you root yourself in your own experience. You grow steadily, quietly, without needing constant confirmation. Progress feels real because it is yours. You stop asking, "How do I compare?" and start asking, "Am I living honestly?" In the end, letting go of comparison is letting go of a false measuring stick. There is no universal timeline, no single definition of success, no correct way to become yourself. Buddhism teaches that peace comes when you stop looking sideways and start looking inward. When you walk your own path with awareness, confidence emerges naturally, not the loud confidence of superiority, but the quiet confidence of alignment. You know where you are going because you are finally paying attention to your own steps. And in that grounded attention, reinvention continues not as a reaction to others, but as a sincere unfolding of your own life. 17. Let go of the need to control your thoughts and learn to rest as awareness. One of the most misunderstood struggles on a spiritual or self-care path is the belief that you must control your thoughts in order to be peaceful. Many people approach inner work with the idea that a calm life requires a quiet mind, and that a quiet mind must be forced into silence. When thoughts continue to arise as they naturally do, frustration sets in. You begin to believe something is wrong with you. In Buddhism, this struggle itself is the problem. Reinvention becomes impossible when you turn the mind into an enemy that must be conquered. From the moment you wake up, thoughts appear automatically. Plans, memories, worries, judgments, fantasies all arise without asking for permission. This is not a personal failure. It is the nature of the human mind. Buddhism teaches that thoughts are not you, and they are not under direct control. Trying to dominate or suppress them is like trying to stop the wind by shouting at it. The more you fight your thoughts, the more agitated the mind becomes. The need to control thoughts usually comes from fear. You fear that certain thoughts mean something about you. You fear negativity, doubt, anger, or intrusive images. You believe that if these thoughts exist, they define your character or your future. Buddhism gently corrects this misunderstanding. Thoughts are mental events, not truths. They arise due to conditioning, habit, memory, and environment. Having a thought does not mean you agree with it, believe it, or will act on it. Letting go of the need to control your thoughts begins with a radical shift in relationship. Instead of asking, "How do I stop thinking?" you ask, "What happens if I stop fighting thinking?" This shift immediately reduces inner tension. When you allow thoughts to come and go without resistance, their intensity decreases. Buddhism teaches that attention feeds thought, not thought itself. When you stop feeding thoughts with fear or judgment, they lose their power. Many people believe that peace will arrive after the mind becomes quiet. Buddhism teaches the opposite. Peace arrives when you stop demanding quiet. Silence emerges naturally when resistance dissolves. When you sit with awareness, simply noticing thoughts without chasing them or pushing them away, you discover that thoughts move on their own. They arise, linger briefly, and fade. You do not need to manage this process. Life already knows how to flow. This practice is deeply liberating because it removes the burden of self-surveillance. You no longer need to monitor every mental movement. You stop labeling thoughts as good or bad, spiritual or unspiritual. You allow the mind to be a mind. Buddhism teaches that awakening is not the absence of thought, but the absence of identification with thought. You are not the voice in your head, you are the awareness that hears it. Letting go of thought control also heals anxiety. Anxiety often comes from trying to think your way into safety. You replay scenarios, anticipate problems, and rehearse outcomes, believing that more thinking will bring certainty. Buddhism teaches that certainty cannot be achieved through thought alone. When you stop compulsively thinking, the body relaxes, the nervous system settles. You feel safer not because you solved everything, but because you stopped fighting the moment. This habit also transforms meditation. Many people approach meditation as a performance trying to achieve stillness, focus, or spiritual success. When thoughts arise, they feel discouraged. Buddhism reframes meditation as allowing, not achieving. Each time you notice a thought and gently return to awareness, you are practicing wisdom. There is no failure in thinking. There is only forgetting and remembering, and remembering is the practice. Letting go of control does not mean becoming passive or careless. You still use thinking when it is useful, planning, learning, communicating. The difference is that thinking becomes a tool, not a tyrant. You think when needed and you rest when not. Buddhism teaches balance, not suppression. When the mind is no longer forced, it becomes clearer naturally. This practice also changes your relationship with difficult thoughts. Instead of panicking when dark or repetitive thoughts appear, you observe them with curiosity. You notice how they feel in the body. You see how they rise and fall. Over time, fear dissolves. You realize that even the most disturbing thoughts cannot harm you when met with awareness. This realization brings profound inner freedom. Letting go of thought control also deepens presence. When you stop living inside constant mental commentary, you reconnect with direct experience, sounds, sensations, breath, movement. Life feels more vivid and grounded. You are no longer trapped in interpretation. Buddhism teaches that reality is always happening before thought describes it. When you rest as awareness, you meet life directly. This habit is essential for reinvention because old identities live in thought. Stories about who you were, what went wrong, and what must happen next are sustained by constant mental repetition. When you stop controlling thoughts and instead observe them, these identities loosen. You no longer need to fight the old self. It fades naturally when not fed. Over time, resting as awareness creates a deep inner stability. You are no longer shaken by every thought or emotion. You understand that mental weather changes, but the sky of awareness remains. This understanding brings a quiet confidence that does not depend on positive thinking or mental discipline. In Buddhism, freedom is not achieved by perfect control, but by deep understanding. When you let go of the need to control your thoughts, you stop struggling with your own nature. You become spacious instead of rigid, curious instead of fearful, gentle instead of forceful. Reinvention reaches a subtle and powerful maturity here. You are no longer trying to fix the mind. You are learning to live without being dominated by it. You think when needed. You rest when possible. You observe without judgment. And in that relaxed awareness, clarity arises naturally. This is one of the deepest forms of self-care Buddhism offers, realizing that you do not need to win a battle against your mind to be free. You only need to stop fighting and learn to see. When you do, peace is no longer something you chase. It becomes the ground you stand on. 18. Let go of the need to always be strong and learn the power of gentle presence. One of the most deeply rooted expectations placed on human beings is the need to always be strong. Strength is praised. Vulnerability is often misunderstood. From an early age, you may have learned directly or indirectly that showing pain is weakness, that slowing down is failure, and that needing support is something to hide. Over time, this belief turns into an identity. You become the one who holds everything together, who endures silently, who keeps going no matter what. In Buddhism, this constant demand for strength is recognized as a subtle but heavy form of suffering. Reinvention becomes difficult when you believe you must carry life alone. The need to always be strong often comes from fear. Fear of burdening others, fear of being judged, fear of losing control, fear of appearing fragile. Buddhism teaches that this fear creates inner rigidity. You tense against life instead of meeting it. You suppress emotions instead of allowing them to move. You stay upright even when you are exhausted. This rigidity may look admirable from the outside, but inside it slowly drains vitality, joy, and authenticity. Letting go of the need to always be strong does not mean collapsing or giving up. Buddhism does not teach helplessness. It teaches balance. There is a difference between strength that comes from presence and strength that comes from resistance. Resistance-based strength is exhausting because it requires constant effort. Presence-based strength is sustainable because it allows rest, softness, and honesty. When you stop forcing yourself to be strong, a deeper resilience begins to emerge. Buddhism teaches that gentleness is not the opposite of strength, it is its foundation. When you allow yourself to feel what you feel without judgment, you conserve energy instead of wasting it on suppression. Tears, fatigue, confusion, and doubt are not signs that something is wrong with you. They are signals from your inner life, asking for attention. When you meet these signals with gentleness, they often soften on their own. When you ignore them, they harden. The belief that you must always be strong also creates emotional isolation. You stop sharing honestly. You stop asking for help. You convince yourself that others wouldn't understand or that your pain is not valid enough. Buddhism teaches that this isolation is unnecessary suffering. Human beings are interdependent by nature. Just as no tree grows alone, no person is meant to carry everything independently. Letting yourself be supported does not diminish you, it reconnects you with life. Learning gentle presence means staying with your experience without trying to fix it immediately. Instead of pushing through pain, you pause and listen. Instead of judging your emotions, you allow them to be present. Buddhism teaches mindfulness not as control, but as companionship. You learn how to sit beside your own pain like a caring friend, rather than an impatient judge. This presence creates safety inside you, and safety is what allows healing. Letting go of forced strength also changes how you relate to time. When you are always strong, you rush recovery. You expect yourself to move on quickly. You minimize your own wounds. Buddhism teaches that healing has its own rhythm. Some experiences need to be felt slowly. Some grief needs space. When you allow yourself time, you stop re-injuring yourself by pretending you are fine when you are not. This practice also transforms how you see vulnerability. Vulnerability is often feared because it feels exposed. But Buddhism teaches that vulnerability is openness, and openness is where wisdom enters. When you allow yourself to be vulnerable, you become more honest with yourself. You stop maintaining appearances. You stop living from a role. You start living from truth. This honesty is deeply liberating. Letting go of the need to always be strong also makes you more compassionate toward others. When you allow your own softness, you become less judgmental of others' struggles. You listen without trying to fix. You understand without minimizing. Buddhism teaches that compassion arises naturally when you stop demanding perfection from yourself and from life. This habit is essential for reinvention because transformation requires surrender. Old identities dissolve only when you stop gripping them tightly. If you insist on being strong all the time, you never allow the old self to rest. Gentle presence gives space for what is outdated to fall away naturally. You do not have to destroy who you were. You simply stop holding them together through force. Over time, practicing gentleness creates a quiet confidence. You trust yourself not because you can endure everything, but because you can respond wisely to whatever arises. You know when to act and when to rest. You know when to speak and when to be silent. This discernment is true strength in Buddhism, not domination, but harmony. Living with gentle presence also reconnects you with joy. Constant strength leaves no room for play, curiosity, or wonder. When you soften, life feels lighter. You notice small moments again. You breathe more deeply. You smile without forcing it. Buddhism teaches that joy is not something you manufacture. It emerges when struggle eases. Reinvention reaches a compassionate maturity here. You stop trying to prove how strong you are and start honoring how alive you are. You allow yourself to be human with all its tenderness and imperfection. You no longer fear falling apart because you trust your ability to come back together gently. In Buddhism, liberation is not becoming invincible, it is becoming intimate with life as it is. When you let go of the need to always be strong, you discover a quieter power, one that does not resist, does not harden, and does not break under pressure. It bends, listens, and responds. This is the wisdom of gentle presence. You do not survive life by armoring yourself against it. You survive and thrive by meeting it openly, honestly, and kindly. And in that gentleness, reinvention becomes not a struggle, but a natural unfolding. 19. Let go of the need to have everything figured out and learn to live with trust and openness. One of the quietest but most exhausting burdens the human mind carries is the belief that you must have everything figured out. You feel pressure to know who you are, where you are going, what your purpose is, and how your life should unfold. When answers are unclear, anxiety arises. You tell yourself that uncertainty is a problem, that confusion means failure, and that not knowing is something to fix as quickly as possible. In Buddhism, this struggle against uncertainty is recognized as a major source of suffering. Reinvention becomes painful when you believe clarity must come before living. From an early age, you are encouraged to plan, decide, and define yourself. Society rewards certainty and confidence, while confusion is often treated as weakness. Over time, this conditioning creates an inner demand. I should know by now. When you don't, self-doubt creeps in. You compare yourself to others who appear decisive and settled. You feel behind. Buddhism teaches that this pressure is based on a misunderstanding of life. Life is not a straight line with clear milestones. It is a living process that unfolds through experience, not prediction. The need to have everything figured out often comes from fear. Fear of making the wrong choice, fear of wasting time, fear of missing out, fear of ending up lost. The mind believes that certainty will protect you from pain. But Buddhism teaches that certainty is an illusion. Even the most carefully planned lives encounter loss, change, and surprise. Trying to eliminate uncertainty only creates more tension. When you demand answers that are not yet ready to appear, you turn not knowing into suffering. Letting go of the need to have everything figured out begins with accepting that uncertainty is not a flaw in your life. It is a natural condition of being alive. Buddhism teaches that wisdom does not come from having all the answers, but from being present with the questions. When you allow yourself to not know, your mind softens. You stop forcing conclusions. You begin to listen more deeply to what life is showing you, moment by moment. Living with openness means trusting the unfolding instead of controlling it. This does not mean becoming careless or passive. Buddhism does not teach blind faith. It teaches responsive awareness. You take the step that is clear now, without demanding to see the entire path. You act with sincerity, then remain open to adjustment. This approach reduces anxiety because you are no longer trying to carry the future all at once. The need to figure everything out often disconnects you from the present. You treat the current moment as a waiting room for clarity instead of a place where life is happening. Buddhism reminds you that insight arises through experience, not through mental overanalysis. Many people think their way in circles, hoping thought will deliver certainty. But understanding often arrives quietly through living, through mistakes, through time, through stillness. Letting go of this need also heals self-judgment. When you believe you should have answers by now, you criticize yourself harshly. You label yourself as lost, slow, or incapable. Buddhism teaches that these judgments are based on imagined timelines. There is no universal schedule for awakening, purpose, or fulfillment. Each person's understanding ripens differently. When you release comparison and urgency, compassion naturally arises. This habit of openness also builds courage. When you stop demanding certainty, you become more willing to explore. You try things without needing guarantees. You allow yourself to learn through experience rather than waiting for perfect clarity. Buddhism teaches that clinging to certainty keeps you stuck, while openness allows movement. Growth often begins before understanding catches up. Letting go of the need to figure everything out also transforms how you relate to fear. Fear thrives in uncertainty because the mind fills the unknown with worst-case scenarios. When you learn to sit with not knowing, fear loses its grip. You realize that you have navigated uncertainty before, and you are still here. This realization builds trust in your ability to respond, even when the path is unclear. This practice also deepens humility. You stop pretending to know more than you do. You become honest about confusion without shame. Buddhism teaches that humility is not thinking less of yourself, but seeing clearly. When you allow yourself to be a learner, life becomes your teacher. Every experience, pleasant or difficult, offers information. Over time, living with trust and openness creates a sense of inner ease. You no longer feel chased by the future. You stop interrogating every decision. You allow life to reveal itself gradually. This does not mean you stop caring about direction. It means you stop demanding certainty before you move. You trust that clarity will emerge through engagement, not avoidance. Reinvention matures here. You are no longer trying to design a perfect life from the mind. You are participating in life as it unfolds. You adjust, refine, and realign without panic. Buddhism teaches that flexibility is wisdom. When you release rigid plans, you become responsive rather than reactive. In the end, letting go of the need to have everything figured out is an act of deep self-trust. You trust that you can meet life as it comes. You trust that confusion is not failure, but part of learning. You trust that you do not need to know the whole path to take the next honest step. This is the quiet freedom Buddhism offers. When you stop demanding answers from the future, you return fully to the present. And in that presence, life reveals itself, not all at once, but in exactly the way you are meant to receive it. 20. Let go of the need to be liked and learn to live from inner integrity. One of the most powerful yet quietly destructive attachments a person carries is the need to be liked. It often hides behind politeness, kindness, and cooperation, so it rarely gets questioned. You tell yourself you are just being considerate, easygoing, or respectful. But beneath that surface, there is often fear of rejection, fear of conflict, fear of being misunderstood or abandoned. In Buddhism, this attachment is seen as a subtle form of self-abandonment. Reinvention becomes impossible when your sense of safety depends on other people's approval. From a very young age, you learn that acceptance feels like survival. You are rewarded for pleasing others and corrected when you disappoint them. Slowly, this conditioning teaches you to monitor yourself constantly. You watch your words. You soften your truth. You adjust your behavior to fit the room. Over time, this turns into an inner habit where you no longer ask, "Is this true for me?" but instead ask, "Will this be accepted?" Buddhism teaches that this shift pulls you away from your own center. The need to be liked creates inner division. There is who you are and who you present yourself to be. You may not even notice the gap at first, but it shows up as exhaustion, resentment, or a quiet sense of emptiness. You give and give, yet feel unseen. You stay agreeable, yet feel unheard. Buddhism teaches that when your actions are guided by approval rather than integrity, peace cannot last. You may avoid conflict, but you create tension within yourself. Letting go of the need to be liked begins with understanding that approval is unstable. People's opinions change. Their moods shift. Their values differ. Building your identity on something so inconsistent creates constant anxiety. Buddhism teaches that anything impermanent cannot be a reliable source of peace. When you depend on being liked, your inner state rises and falls with others' reactions. This is not freedom, it is emotional dependency. Living from inner integrity means aligning your actions with your values, even when it is uncomfortable. It means speaking honestly when silence would be easier. It means setting boundaries when compliance would be rewarded. Buddhism does not teach aggression or disregard for others. It teaches right action, acting from clarity, compassion, and truth rather than fear. Integrity is not about being liked or disliked. It is about being at peace with yourself. Fear often arises when you consider letting go of approval. You may worry that people will leave, judge, or misunderstand you. Buddhism invites you to look closely at this fear. Ask yourself what kind of connection is built on self-erasure. If someone only accepts you when you are performing, that acceptance is conditional. Letting go of the need to be liked does not destroy real relationships. It reveals which ones are rooted in truth. This practice also transforms boundaries. Many people struggle to set boundaries because they fear displeasing others. Buddhism teaches that boundaries are not acts of rejection, they are acts of honesty. When you respect your limits, you teach others how to relate to you. You stop overextending yourself. You stop saying yes when your body and heart are saying no. This clarity reduces resentment and builds self-respect. Letting go of approval-seeking also changes how you experience criticism. When you no longer need to be liked, criticism loses its sting. You listen openly, discerning what is useful and what is not. You no longer collapse or defend automatically. Buddhism teaches equanimity, remaining balanced in praise and blame. This balance arises naturally when your worth is no longer outsourced. This habit also deepens compassion. When you stop needing to be liked, you stop manipulating situations to secure approval. Your kindness becomes genuine rather than strategic. You help because it is right, not because you want to be seen as good. Buddhism teaches that pure intention brings peace. When your actions are not tangled with self-image, they feel lighter and more sincere. Letting go of the need to be liked also frees creativity and authenticity. You allow yourself to express ideas that may not be popular. You choose paths that may not be understood. You become less afraid of standing alone. Buddhism teaches that truth often requires courage, not consensus. When you honor your inner compass, you walk with quiet confidence, even in uncertainty. This practice is essential for reinvention because growth often disrupts expectations. People who knew your old self may resist your change. If you cling to being liked, you will shrink back into familiar roles. Letting go of approval allows transformation to continue. You give yourself permission to evolve without seeking permission from others. Over time, living from integrity creates deep inner stability. You feel grounded because your actions align with your values. You may not always be liked, but you are no longer divided inside. Buddhism teaches that inner harmony is more important than external harmony. When you stop betraying yourself for acceptance, peace becomes possible. Letting go of the need to be liked does not mean becoming harsh or indifferent. It means becoming honest and kind at the same time. You speak truth with compassion. You act with consideration without self-erasure. This balance is wisdom in action. Reinvention completes itself here. You no longer shape your life around other people's comfort. You shape it around truth, awareness, and responsibility. You accept that not everyone will understand or approve, and you are at peace with that. In Buddhism, freedom is not found in being admired, but in being aligned. When you let go of the need to be liked, you reclaim your voice, your energy, and your direction. You stop living for applause and start living with integrity. And in that quiet, grounded alignment, life begins to feel honest, spacious, and deeply your own. Reinvention, as Buddhism teaches, is not a dramatic transformation where you abandon yourself and become someone entirely different. It is something far quieter, far deeper, and far more honest. It is the gradual process of letting go of fear, false identities, old stories, rigid expectations, and attachments that once felt necessary but now only weigh you down. What remains after all this letting go is not emptiness, but clarity, not loss, but freedom. Throughout this journey, each act of letting go was an act of self-care. You learned to release the pressure to be perfect, the need to rush, the craving for approval, the fear of uncertainty, the illusion of control, and the habit of resisting pain. You learned that peace does not come from fixing yourself, proving yourself, or securing life against change. It comes from understanding the nature of life and learning how to meet it with awareness instead of fear. Buddhism reminds you again and again that suffering is not caused by life itself, but by the way the mind clings, resists, and demands certainty from what is inherently uncertain. When you stop fighting impermanence, stop arguing with pain, and stop trying to manage every outcome, something profound happens. The mind softens. The heart opens. Life becomes lighter, not because it is easier, but because you are no longer carrying unnecessary weight. Reinvention is not about constant self-improvement. It is about self-honesty. It is about seeing clearly what no longer serves you and having the courage to release it. You do not need to wait until you are healed, confident, or fully certain to live well. You begin living well the moment you stop abandoning yourself in pursuit of some imagined future version. This path is not fast, and it is not flashy. It unfolds quietly, through small daily choices, choosing presence over panic, compassion over criticism, integrity over approval, awareness over control. Some days you will feel grounded, other days you will feel lost again. Buddhism teaches that both belong. Growth is not linear, and peace is not permanent, but awareness can always be returned to. Most importantly, reinvention does not mean standing alone against life. As you let go, you discover connection to your own inner truth, to other human beings, and to life itself. You realize you were never broken, never behind, never separate. You were simply carrying too much that was never meant to be carried forever. So let go gently. Not all at once, not with force. Let go as life invites you to moment by moment, breath by breath. Trust that what falls away needed to go. Trust that what remains is enough. In Buddhism, freedom is not found at the end of the journey. It is found in how you walk it. And when you walk with awareness, honesty, and compassion, reinvention stops being something you chase and becomes something you live.